Good evening to everybody and welcome to the Friday edition of Vogan's European Outlook. It's amazing to think that we've reached the end of another working week and the end of the Vogan's European Outlooks for this working week anyway. No live stream this upcoming weekend. I'm going to be down visiting my dad, but the good news is that there will still be uploaded videos. There will be a global weather report, but it just won't be live, and there will also be a tropical outlook as well, because we have got, albeit not much in the way of systems in the Atlantic, but over in the West Pacific, we've got a double whammy for the Philippines and also Vietnam. So we're going to be looking at that. We'll also do a little bit of a look back at what was said with regards to the hurricane season forecast also. So stay tuned for that. Still plenty coming up over the weekend. And remember I showed just a couple of days ago a system that was moving into Portugal and Spain, bringing some heavy rainfall, lots of lightning, thunder, and whatnot. That frontal boundary continued to press eastwards, and this was the scene from Mallorca back during the course of yesterday. Today is the 17th. This was yesterday. A severe thunderstorm hit the Balearic Islands since this morning, bringing heavy rain, thunder, and strong winds. Around 30 incidents have been reported, mostly in Mallorca. So watch this video here. This is from Volcaholic. I think I've always been saying volcanic for some strange reason, but it's actually Volcaholic. But check this video out. It's pretty remarkable, actually, capturing a lightning strike. So that was a very, very close strike indeed. So that's that same boundary that moved in and swept across Siberia and then probably reinvigorated with the aid of warm waters over the western Mediterranean basin. Okay, so this is how the past 10 days in terms of precipitation anomaly is looking like. So it has been a relatively wet start to November. It was a wet end to October. So this is the past 10 days. Look at the down across, particularly western portions of Iberia, dry across much of France, except for a pocket in east central France, for example. A few pockets of significant wet weather across parts of Italy. We've got a mixture of dry versus wet in the Balkan region here, dry mostly across Turkey. And we've got a central swathe of Europe here that is wetter than average. Mixture over Scandinavia, largely wet than average across Russia. In terms of temperature anomaly for the month so far, it is running very warm compared to average. That brings me on quite nicely to discuss the comparison to last November. So in today's video, I want to look somewhat at the correlation between what is happening with the Mann-Julian oscillation, the type of pattern that we started off with, and then where that month ended up going, because it was quite a dramatic month last November. So, but I want to show you just quickly the sea surface temperature anomalies, because this is quite interesting. In terms of the SST anomalies, this is this year compared to the same time last year. This is as of the 3rd of November versus 2025. So this is 2024. You can see here a weak La Nina signal. Got the very warm waters over the North Pacific extending from the Sea of Japan across to California here. We do have cooling within the Gulf of Alaska. And we've obviously got a very warm North Atlantic. Now, if we look at this time around, the one key difference, in my opinion, would be we've got a stronger cool signal within the equatorial Pacific. We've got a colder West Indian Ocean. We've got a record strong. In fact, you have to go back to 1996, the last time we had such a negative IOD. We've got those warm waters extending from the Sea of Japan to California. We've got the cool within the Gulf of Alaska. We've got a warm North Atlantic with a ribbon of cool in between. That could be a little bit of an interesting look here. Remember, the winter ideas are continuing to build. The forecast will be released on Sunday the 30th of November, so stay tuned of course, for all that. But you can see here a similarity, particularly so in the Pacific and to an extent the Atlantic as well, between the 3rd of November this year versus the 3rd of November last year. And in terms of the Madden-Julian oscillation, the MJO is like this here. So this was what it looked like last year. We had this rotation out of phase 5 into 6, into 7, into 8. Now, granted, this is how it's looking. So that was last year in November. This is this year. You can see here that it's going, we're stuck in phase 5. We've obviously got very warm temperatures across much of Europe at the moment here. So again, very similar to last year. There is a rotation into phases 6, into phases 7. There is a struggle to get into phases 7 and 8. And part of that reason may be due to that colder water within the central equatorial Pacific that is distorting that enhanced convection. The convection wants warmer than average water temperatures. When you've got those cold waters towards the dateline, this is where you want to have a more east-based La Nina signal here, where you've got warmer waters within the central equatorial Pacific and colder waters in the East Pacific. That then encourages the MJO to go into those colder phases of 6, 7, and 8. So this is the slight blip. Now, there is definitely elements of concern further down the road. Like I said, I've mentioned quite substantially over recent days about the significant deceleration in the winds surrounding the polar vortex, the strong warming that's showing up in the models here at 10 millibars. And that obviously would be more in correlation to the month of December as opposed to November. I want to emphasize a couple of points here that we're talking with regards to that disruption of the polar vortex. That's a December thing. But what's more immediate is the fact that the MJO is trying to get into phases 6 and 7, and even phases 6 at this time of the year can deliver cold weather to the UK. Where the block develops is going to be critical here. We could be stuck underneath a block of high pressure. The cold air then gets driven down into Eastern Europe or down into the Atlantic, and we miss out due to that boulder in the stream. The cold air runs around that boulder. Same idea within the atmosphere here. We also have a situation where you could have a negative North Atlantic oscillation, but still have an undercutting jet beneath that block into the UK and Ireland, driving Atlantic air underneath that area of high pressure over Greenland here. We could have a situation where you've got that stretched polar vortex. Stretched polar vortexes between Siberia and North America can lead to a stronger jet and potentially stormy weather, but milder weather across western areas of Europe as well. These are all ifs, buts, and maybes. There's more questions than there is answers at the moment here. Next week, fascinating situation developing. Arctic air trying to come south, warmer, trying to lift north, record-breaking warmer, that, by the way, for the time of the year. But you can see the comparison here between November this year, that's current, and this is November of last year. And when you look back at exactly what took place, this was the opening 10 days to November. Granted, we did have a little slice of colder than average extending from Turkey all the way to the Netherlands and Belgium. Warmer than average UK and Ireland. And you can see here that we essentially, it was quite an amazing month here. This is the outlook for December, but I'll talk a little bit about November that had just gone. Quite an amazing November, draws to an end for UK with from the warmest and driest first half of the month to significantly colder second half of the month, with a near average for some colder than average for the month as a whole. So Europe has seen wild swings too, with Iceland perhaps witnessing the most outrageous of all, followed closely by France and Spain, with overnight temperatures of 26, 27 Celsius. At the same time, extreme blizzard conditions affected parts of Turkey. So that's obviously, there's variations, there's differences, of course, but from all-time November highs across Ireland didn't quite reach that level right enough this year, but for so early, for the coldest so early in the UK. So you go from record warm temperatures for the month of November in Ireland to the coldest so early for the UK, minus 11.2 since 1998. Coldest November night, minus 12.4, and the most significant UK November snow since 2010. So an exceptional month last year. And yes, we've got very warm conditions at the moment here. If we look at the article of the Met Office that had been just released, I think today, you can see here that we've had a record warm bonfire night, for example. Temperatures overnight only dropped to 14.4 at Teddington in London, provisionally making it the mildest bonfire night on record. Provisional record for the night of the 5th and 6th November was 13.9 at Gordon Castle, Scotland in 1938. 1938, by the way, was followed on by a bitterly cold period. Highlights from the new records: Valley at Gwynedd, 14.1 in the 6th, surpassed the previous record in 2022. Again, 2022. It was followed by a pretty cold December, it has to be said. Chevener in Devon, 14.8. This is minimum temperatures, of course, in the 5th of November, beating the previous of 14.1 in 1996. In 1996 was followed by a cold period as well. Clodrose in Cornwall, 13.8 minimum on the 5th, exceeding the previous 13.6 in 2010. We know what was followed in 2010 as well. So a lot of these records is fascinating because they were followed by cold periods. And given what's happening with the PV, December has an opportunity, not a guarantee by any stretch, but certainly at the very least, folks, it's interesting what's going on here. So you can check that out, that article. It's on the Met Office blog, and rather fascinating to see. But back to my own article here. This was the first 10 days of November. This was the last 10 days of November. And look at the difference here. Firmly colder than average across both the UK and Ireland. Most significant snow for November since 2010. We had minus 12.4 Celsius at Kinbrace and Sutherland. The month to date overall, this was out to the 29th of November. You've got this average to below average temperatures, and while we may not get the extremes of that, when you look at the projection of the ECMWF, you can see here this is the current situation that we've got at the moment here. So areas of low pressure to the west, higher pressure to the east. We've got that southerly airflow. This is the 850, so 5,000 foot temperature anomalies, and you can see here as we play through, remain milder than average. Continue to play through. Then there's an area of low pressure that's to the west, spinning up to the west of the UK and Ireland. Early next week, there is strong model agreement. Now, notice here we've got warm air getting driven northwards on the western side of the North Atlantic, getting lifted up through the Baffin Straits, Greenland. We've got this cold then coming down into Iceland, while we've got warmer further east coming northwards here. So you can see the complexity to this, but truly fascinating stuff. Continue to play through. Look at the anomalies here. Look at how warm that air is compared to average. You're talking about 12 to 16 Celsius, potentially record warm 850 temperatures for the middle of November here. But look at how the cold air is coming into Scandinavia. Now, in a second or two, I'm going to show you the potential evolution of this pattern from a global perspective, from a northern hemispheric perspective. So you see this warmth here getting drawn north, then shoved slightly east. You've got an area of high pressure, 1030 millibars here, building between Iceland and Greenland. We've got a lot of warmer at 850. That warmer tends to correlate to higher pressure building. Continue to play through. Then you notice here that we start to get the colder air coming in to the western side of Europe here. All that warmth is now pushed in the eastern areas of Europe. Continue to play it through. See areas of low pressure getting deflected further south. Area of high pressure building from the central Atlantic up into Greenland, up into the Arctic. That then sets a situation here. Low to the east, high to the west. Northerly airflow here. Again, want to continue to drum this point here. I'm not turning around and saying this is exactly what's going to happen. This is model projection, but there is a lot of backing to all this. Look at that there. So big contrast between this time frame. So this is Friday the 21st of November and say Thursday, Friday the 14th of November here. So quite the difference showing up here. So it will be a fascinating watch to see this evolve, because what we've got here is a situation that is quite complex. Now look at this here, Tuesday the 18th of November. Look at that anomalous ridge here sitting bang slap over Greenland. Look at the anomalous trough here to the southwest of the UK and Ireland. We've got a building of ridging across North America. Now essentially what's going to happen is we're actually going to see the cold dump into the eastern side of the United States first. So the cold is building. Notice here that we've got this deep trough over eastern North America. As that trough deepens and sharpens, we're then pumping the high over Greenland and Iceland. We're also then forcing a cut-off low down towards the Azores here, high pressure up towards Scandinavia. Could see an easterly component to that. Then you can see here more features dipping, dropping into that trough over eastern North America. That continues to force the heights to rise over Greenland and Iceland. You can see here high pressure kind of essentially over much of Europe, but we've got this cold push of air coming in from the north. And you notice here the entire system just continues to build the pressure, deepens and sharpens the troughs, push them further south. The jet is getting forced further south. And this is setting up a very interesting overall situation here. Now I want to look at the 350 millibar, 300 millibar winds here. This is the jet stream winds. And you notice here that what we're doing is we're sending deep lows into the Aleutians, into Alaska. We're transporting a lot of heat up towards the Arctic region here. That could be what's going to force pressure to build over the Arctic and send the Arctic Oscillation, North Atlantic Oscillation negative. Notice here that we are seeing these systems continuing to sharpen the ridges and troughs here, where it's like crinkling up paper. We're sending an arm of the jet further north into the Arctic, but also we're sending the troughs further south into the mid-latitude pattern. And it's like we're actually stretching the north-south orientation of the ridges and the troughs. Eventually what is happening is we're actually seeing these troughs become cut off and developing into cut-off areas of low pressure within the mid-latitude belt. See here, this little cut-off. Look, as the trough then almost folds in on itself, it then breaks that feature off, becomes a separate entity. We see this sharp trough over eastern portions of North America. All the while, we're transporting heat up into the Arctic, by the way. Continue to see here as we play through. Then the trough almost closes in on itself. We'll see this cut-off feature developing here. Look at how far north and south the jet is. So we've got one piece going all the way up into the Arctic of Canada. The troughs are now sinking well into the subtropical belt here. All the while, you notice here something. As we're continuing to amplify the overall hemispheric pattern, and we're seeing the ridges and the troughs much more stretched out, you notice here that we've got this little ribbon of jet stream winds at 300 millibars aligned with, from eastern Siberia across the pole and down the eastern side of eastern side of Greenland here. Are we seeing a bit of a connection, a bit of a cross-polar flow from Siberia straight across into the north of Europe here? That is something I'm paying close attention to. Look at this here. Look at the connection. So you've got the ridge here and the jet all the way up into northern Greenland. At the same time, it's meeting up with this little stream of winds that are coming from Siberia across the top of the pole, and essentially that could be feeding cold across from Siberia almost straight down towards the UK and Ireland. If we're putting the 850 anomalies here, I was looking at this last night and I thought this was quite a fascinating. So if you look at the 850 anomalies here, let's go back, right, and play through this loop. Now, granted, just what I was saying here, we're stretching out the ridges and the troughs. The troughs are almost, getting squashed together and creating a cut-off feature. Look at how cold the air mass is. This is as of Sunday coming up here. Look at how cold the air mass is over eastern North America. Not much in the way of cold across Europe. Continue to play it through. All the while, we're transporting, as this trough drops into the eastern United States, we're transporting warm air from the tropics up the eastern side of the trough, up through the Baffin Straits, and into the Arctic region here. All the while, remember I was saying about that jet here extending from Siberia down across the pole, down the eastern side of Greenland here. What that I think that's doing is that's trying to feed Siberian brand air over the pole and down into the North Atlantic here. Look at that there. And again, all the while we're transporting heat up the eastern side of Europe here, from essentially from the southern UK, Spain, France. As that cold air and that trough drops down through Svalbard, in between Iceland and the UK, we're forcing that heat northwards here. So this is that transport of cold south while we're transporting warmth north here. Truly fascinating to see the fluidity of the atmosphere and how this is all evolving here. Essentially, in my opinion anyway, by this stage, this is Tuesday the 18th, this is only GFS operational, so this is one example of hundreds of model runs here. But look at how this cold air mass down towards the Azores, I think that looks as if it originated over Siberia. Isn't that fascinating? And this is how it becomes more complex. This is, forget about the polar vortex, the stretching and whatever. This is just now, and this is what could be creating that weakening of the polar vortex, because what we're doing is we're building pressure into the Arctic. When you shove heat from the tropics up towards the pole, you're then building the air pressure at the surface and aloft. And when you're stretching the depth of the troposphere in a region that the troposphere is shallowest, so over the Arctic, over the pole, the troposphere is at its shallowest globally. When you're sending all this heat up into the troposphere, you're expanding the troposphere, and by expanding the troposphere, you're contracting the stratosphere, and all these wave breaks, probably triggered by that phase 6 of the MJO, is creating that frictional effect within the stratospheric polar vortex and causing this to occur, this deceleration, this rapid deceleration, because it's no coincidence that what's going on here within the troposphere over the Arctic, transporting heat northwards, that then forces the deceleration of the winds at the same time within the polar vortex at 10 millibars here. So certainly, I know there's a lot to take into account here, but this is something I'm truly fascinated by, and it will be interesting to watch this space as we go through the next wee while or so. So as that rotation into phases 5, 6, 7 last November, we've seen the response in the Arctic Oscillation. It went negative. It didn't go as negative as I expected, if I'm being honest. The Arctic Oscillation didn't go massively negative, which is interesting. But if you notice and this is the same, very similar time frame actually to last November in terms of this November and the projections. Look at how it went from firmly positive. This is the NAO. Let's blow this up just a second here, because this is quite important. So, interesting how the AO did go negative, but not overly negative. But look at the NAO. It went from phases 3, 4, 5, warm phases, positive, and then it shot down into negative territory, -2 sigma. Then it slowly recovered as we headed towards month of December. So yes, certainly truly interesting stuff. And this is the projection, by the way, of the ECM ensemble for the Arctic oscillation. No, this is the North Atlantic oscillation. So look at the timing, mid to late month, negative, with what's going on with the Mount-Julian oscillation moving towards phases 6 and 7. This is the Arctic oscillation here of the same model ECM extended here. So very interesting stuff. Let's end then with see if the models are suggesting a colder change. So I think we're going to turn colder for North America first, then for at least western areas of Europe. We'll wait and see what happens. Again, this may not happen, but I'm giving you the evidence to back up what I'm saying here. This is not even discussing the month of December, as has been talked about in recent days. Playthrough of the GFS extended will turn colder, it has to be said, and yeah, it gradually starts to warm up again. So that's the GFS extended. Let's have a look at the ECMWF weeklies. So again, warmer than average out to the 13th of November. Remember, we've got that next surge of warmth coming northwards. Play through, we'll lose that warmth. Doesn't turn overly warm, overly cold, if you notice here. So we'll wait and see what happens. But certainly, I hope you're enjoying what you're seeing here in the channel. I'm giving you the evidence, the backing as to why, rather than just throwing out these model runs that show cold or warm fitting agendas. Giving you the reasons behind certain elements of the forecast. So like, share, and subscribe. Again, lots of content coming up this weekend, despite no live stream. So I hope you can keep tuning in, like and subscribe. Like I say, I've already repeated that. I'll close off. It's Friday. Enjoy your weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.